Hi everyone, and welcome back to another cooking demonstration. This is Miss Simon here. Today we're going to make some chicken fajitas, and I'm going to do this demonstrating two different cooking methods. We're going to look at sautéing with our chicken and our veggies, and then we're also going to take a look at making some rice and using a moist cooking method, boiling. So I have my mise en place here. You can see I've got my chicken right here, my peppers and onions. Then I've got all my seasoning mix that I'm going to throw together here for us in a minute. And then I have my water and my rice ready to go as well. So some things are pre-measured, some things I'm going to work out, measure, and prepare with you guys. So I hope you're ready. So the first thing we need to do is make our fajita seasoning. And I actually like to make mine homemade. I got this recipe from All Recipes, and the only thing that I omit personally is the cornstarch because I just feel like you don't really need it. So we're going to start with 2 teaspoons of chili powder. And then I'm going to have 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, salt, and sugar each. So you can see I've got things kind of set up by their ingredient amounts. So 1 paprika, 1 salt. Now keep in mind that you are adding a teaspoon of salt right into your seasoning mix, so that probably means you want to limit how much salt you're adding when you're cooking. You want to make sure you're tasting it to see if you need to add much more salt to it. You can also choose to eliminate the salt and just add salt in when you are cooking. And last 1 teaspoon of sugar. Something that's optional. I like it, but you can eliminate again if you're watching sugar as well. All right, next I've got my onion powder, my garlic powder, and my cumin. These are all going to be my ½ teaspoon. All right, 1 more ingredient. That is our cayenne pepper. If you are a spice fan, you know, you can add as much as you want. I'm going to add in the ¼ teaspoon. If you are not a spice fan, you can even omit this if you want, or just add like a little sprinkle to it. Which is probably, oh, there we go. That's what I'm going to have to do if I can't get that lid off. Very full bottles. Let's kind of right, here we go. And there we are. You can take one of the spoons that you were using and just give that a mix together. Sorry, you can probably hear my coffee making in the background. And there we have it. There's our fajita seasoning. We probably won't use all of that. We'll see. Yeah, but now we have enough. All right, so now that I have my seasoning mix all done, I'm going to start preparing my peppers. I'm going to do my peppers and onions before the chicken just to make sure that my cutting board stays as protected as possible, right, from any contaminants or cross contact. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off the top. And I try to waste as little as possible, so I'm actually going to cut off these little segments here so I can use those up. That one. And then I'll grab a little bowl. I usually have one set out already for my waste. That way I don't have to keep going to the garbage can. So we'll leave that over there. Keep in mind unit 2, right? Holding that pinching method there. I'm going to take off some of the insides there. And then I'm going to thinly slice or batonnet, right? You can do a little thicker than a traditional batonnet too. And our peppers are going to be the first thing we actually cook, so I'm not going to put them into a bowl or anything separate. I'll just move them directly from my cutting board into my pan. Each of these in half. There we go. I'm going to do that for each of my other peppers as well. I'll meet you back when we do our onion. All right, moving on to our onion. This is going to be a batonnet as well. You can see I also fibbed. I changed my mind. And I put my peppers in my bowl over there. My cutting board was getting a tad crowded. So like my garbage bowl. All right. So again, we just want some long, thin strips of onion. There we go. I'm just gonna brush off any excess skin that I see there. Perfect. All right. I'm going to start separating them into this and see what my ratio looks like. See if I really need the other half or if it looks like I've got enough. All right. I think this might be enough here. Let's see. I've been making this last week. I actually didn't even use any onion. Not that I don't like it, just wasn't something I was able to eat last week. Yeah, I think that's perfect. So just make sure everything is, all your onions are split apart. And there we go. And now we're gonna start slicing up our chicken. So I'm just gonna set this aside. I'll bag it up here in a minute. So like I said, I was waiting to do the chicken until last because I don't want any kind of cross contact with my veggies, with, you know, cutting board that's gonna then cut something else like my veggies afterwards. Even though it's all gonna get cooked, you know, it just gives me peace of mind. I always do my poultry last. For this, I'm just gonna start by cutting up one. I'll probably end up doing another one later, but we'll only be able to fit one piece in the pan actually, so set that aside. I'm gonna start by trimming it. So all of this fat here, that's not really gonna actually cook down. So we wanna trim that off. There's some gristle in there as well. Cut off as much as you can, obviously. Some of it you just might have to cut off as you are preparing it afterwards or eating it afterwards. You just don't want to get a mouthful of gristle, you know. Double check it on this side. I'm gonna try taking off a little bit more of this here. There we go. That looks better. All right. From here, I'm just gonna do some slices. And I want them to be pretty thin slices. So down here where it's the thinnest part, I'm probably gonna only need to do like one slice. Whereas down here, when I make a slice, I'll probably need to cut that in half because of how thick it is. And I actually like to kind of divide it here, just because I can separate that then. Yeah, I think that's perfect. All right. And if these are a little bit too longer than you want, you can even cut those in half. There's really no exact method to it. It's just however you see fit. Whenever I'm doing them in like smaller tacos, I will cut these in half because I know they're not going to fit in that small of a shell. Get one more cut here. There we go. But since I'm going to be serving mine over rice, this will work just fine. All right, so this is where we get a little thicker. Yep, so see how much wider that is than these? So I'll cut each of these in half as well. They're the same thickness, that way they will cook at about the same rate of time. Last one. Then I'm going to wash my hands, get my pans all ready. I'll meet you back to actually start cooking. Before we actually start cooking our chicken and vegetables, before we start sauteing them, I want to get my rice started. So I'm going to be adding 2 cups of water. And bringing that to a boil. I also want to make sure I get some salt in there. Not too much because the rice is going to absorb all of that salt. Just enough to give it some seasoning. All right, I'm going to turn that up to high so that comes to a boil. As soon as that comes to a boil, I'm going to be adding in my 1 cup of rice. But next, let's get started on our chicken and veggies. All right, one more step before we actually start cooking. Can't forget to add our seasoning to our chicken. So I'm gonna start sprinkling some on there. And then using this hand to spread it all out. You really don't need to add any oil or anything to this because you're gonna be adding some oil into the pan. And honestly, the seasoning sticks perfectly fine. Yep. And I mean, you can add as much seasoning as you want. I like to just add enough that every piece has a nice light coating. So I'll show you here. There we go. Like I said, you can add more if you want. You can add less if you want. So from this is going to go into my frying pan. All right, so to my pan that is set to medium-high heat. We'll see what we need to adjust it as when we add the chicken. I'm going to be adding some oil, which is an important component when we are sauteing or pan frying. You can use olive oil. You really want to stick to just either a regular olive oil, not a extra virgin olive oil, as it has a lower smoke point. You can use some olive oil. You can use vegetable or canola oil, or you can do what I'm doing, and I'm going to be using some coconut oil. And so we'll add about a tablespoon or just shy of a tablespoon in there. See how that melts down. There we go. We'll give that a minute to come up to temperature, and then I'll start adding my chicken in. go. And it's coming up to temperature. So I'm just gonna start adding these in. You wanna make sure there's no overlap, so they're in a nice single layer. But you can try to push them obviously as close together, that way you can fit as many in there as you can. Now when you're making this for a larger number of people, you can obviously use a larger skillet, or you can do what I do, which is do it in batches. We might even need to do some batches today. We'll see. This is also why I like to do this before it fully comes up to temperature. That way my fingers aren't as risk of getting burnt. All right, there we go. These are gonna cook on this side for, oh, it depends, but you know, usually about 4 to 5 minutes. Yeah, so like I said, about 4 to 5 minutes. I wait for them to almost get a little more opaque on this side, because that means they've cooked through like more than halfway through the middle. Flip them over, finish them off for about a minute or two, and that's an easy way to make sure that they're cooked all the way through. Because on these smaller pieces of chicken, it's tougher to use a thermometer. You still can, and I will check on those larger pieces, but I would say 4 to 5 minutes on this first side, followed by 1 to 2 on the next side is going to be your perfect way to make sure it's not overcooked, but also making sure it is cooked to 165. No salmonella here. I'm going to step away to wash my hands, but you keep an eye on that. Looking good so far. You can start to see, right, it's coming up white around the edges there. This side is going to start turning a little more opaque. I'm just going to try spreading around that oil a little bit more. also cleaned out the bowl that it was in before, so no more raw chicken in here. But this is where I can set my chicken aside whenever it is finished for me. So I'll make that right in there. Alright, I'd say about 1 more minute and I'm going to start flipping those over. I find the easiest way to do this is with some tongs. If you prefer to use a spatula, a fork, etc., you know, you find what works for you. This one looks good. I'm going to start from the end that I put them in at. Right. Carefully flip those over. There we go. So like I said, these are going to cook for about 1 minute more. Our water is boiling. That means we can add our rice in there. So I had my 1 cup of rice. I do want to turn this down a little bit, down to a simmer. So it's going to be like medium low. And I'm just going to grab my wooden spoon and give this a stir just to make sure it's evenly distributed. Ooh, look at that steam. So like I said, just to review some cooking methods here, I started off with a rolling boil, brought that water up to a very high temperature. I added in my rice. Now I'm bringing it down to a simmer, which means only small bubbles should be forming. It's going to take a minute for this, obviously, to come down in temp, but it will. And that's actually going to simmer for about 35 minutes. Yeah. These are about ready. Yep. Perfect. Now the reason I'm pulling these out with tongs is because I want to save all of this fat, the juices, the seasonings for when I add in my peppers and onions. That way I don't lose any of that. Now here, you could add more fat in if you'd like. In fact, I am going to grab a little bit more cooking oil. And if you really want a lot of seasoning, you can even add some more seasoning into your peppers and onions. I've made this a few times now, and I really like how it tastes when the peppers just pick up the flavors left in the pan. You can see there's some, let me show you, see like these burn marks? That's even some seasoning left in there. Once these start to cook, I'm actually going to grab a tablespoon of water. I'll throw it in here, and that's going to help all that flavor lift up out of the pan. I'll let those cook down for a minute. Water there. Show you really quickly here. So take a look at my water. You see those nice little bubbles? That's exactly what I'm looking for when I'm simmering. I'm going to lock that moisture in now again. These are almost done. Also, if you know you're making this ahead of time, like this is for a meal prep for myself, you can choose not to cook the peppers and onions all the way, knowing that when you're reheating things, right, they're going to continue to cook a bit, and you don't want to, soggy. So I'm going to stop these cooking right now. I'm going to add in my chicken just to mix everything else back together. So you have an idea of what my finished product's going to look like. Just going to serve all of my peppers and onions and chicken all over that rice whenever it's finished. And it'll go right into some meal prep bowls. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you have questions, anything, just let me know.